Did you know that 100 out of 100 people are suffering with subscriber phobia? So if you hit the subscribe button, you're cured. I've started recording every Mythic Plus key this season, and in these episodes I'll go over the ups and downs of my journey towards getting that juicy sought after 0.1% title. Getting straight into it, a 27 Darkheart Thicket. This was my key, and this was a really interesting one to start the week, and someone swiftly got put on my ignore list straight after his dungeon. A little context to the story though. The group had been formed for about 10 minutes already, and we were discussing the route the whole time, the priest and the DH mainly. People were being lazy as well, so I guess this gave us quite a lot of time to talk about it. We spent like a good 10 minutes going over the route. We were going to do the double invis skip, and the first being the bear in the entrance area here at the start of the dungeon. So we make quick work of that first pull with Lust, and then 4 of us skip past. Look on the map, the priest hasn't moved. Basically, the priest had used his pot already. Shocker. Sometimes these things happen. It is annoying because we did spend 10 minutes talking about it just for this to happen. But it's the start of the key, you know, we can make up for it. That's my mindset. Well, Mr. Tank's mindset, he had another way of viewing it. His ego decided, well, because of that one thing, I can't be asked for the key anymore, and he dipped. You're going to meet these type of people in the game, and it was really annoying, but once he's on the ignore list, I do not have to play with him again. We then move on to a 27 Atal, which is meant to be one of the easier dungeons this season. Meant to be. As it's fortified, we go left and do the standard Bloodlust pull, making sure that we kick the Confessor and the Augur, and then one of our range players is meant to bait the Merciless Assault, which would be the Druid, away from melee. As you're going to see here though, the Druid was just stacked on top of us, so we end up just eating a few of the Merciless Assaults back to back as a whole group. Eventually one of us calls it out, we move on to the second pack, he baits the first charge well, good job Mr. Druid, and then he just comes straight back into melee. As you can probably guess, both charges go off again and take out him and the Paladin. Then we move on to the pack before Priestess, and guess what happens? Yeah, more charges go off. We were stopping the cast when we could throughout the dungeon. I was using Thunderstorm, Cap Totem. The DH was using his displacement abilities. But ultimately, if we ever did miss a cast and we're all a melee anyways, it is game over. Going off that disaster of a start, we end up wiping on the priestess of all bosses, and that is the end of the dungeon. We go right back into another 27 Darkheart, which goes slightly smoother than the previous one. The first pull we do something completely and utterly unhinged. Are you ready to know what it is? We pulled the big bear into the first pack, and yes, you do see that correctly on the affixes, we are on Fortified and Bolstering. This is a wild combo. Thankfully though, your boy brings the fattest funnel damage known to mankind and deletes the bear, and we only lose 2 people before the pull was completed. We clear down the ramp area on the right hand side afterwards, and then we go to invis the double bears. With me being greedy at the start, I end up using my pot, and I thought, being a 27 and fortified, it should be back up in time, but I was offered by about 20 seconds, which is okay, but in the future I think I'll probably just not press the pot as I am just wasting time really just being greedy. We did rack up quite a few deaths clearing everything as well just before the first boss, but thankfully we end up having a really smooth first boss. This area has one thing you mostly need to worry about, and that is the Dryad. They hurt like a mother trucker, so I tried my best to focus them down. I would advise you to do the same. I was sending giga stacked Ellie Blasts into them just to get rid of them. The other thing to worry about is being a clown, like myself, and taking a step too far when the root burst is going off. I tell you what though, you guys in ranged have it so easy compared to melee, let me tell you, and you can attack me all you want in the comments, but I know it to be true. I do another silly thing here, and I fat finger my pot in the pack just before we're about to do a skip. Thankfully though, I get res on the other side because the other people aren't idiots like me. This is where the dungeon goes sour and depletes. We do a big bull with the oogly googly cyclopses down here, and it just goes from bad to worse. Because it's fortified, the ticks of the cast which fear you actually hurt quite a bit, so you cannot just keep letting them cast on you, otherwise you will just die. So if you do end up kicking them early, which is what we had to do, you then have to make up for that with more CC and kicks. The mobs end up getting DR'd really quickly into the pull as well, which didn't help. So the only thing I could have done to help from then on was use my knockup, which I did, and my kick. I tried to use Wall Stomp a little bit later on to stop a few casts, but it does absolutely nothing. As if I was a little baby cow and I was just stamping my feet. We end up having a full wipe, so another depleto. But now for a completo, it is a 27 Atal. There was a few very Monka-esque moments, but as always, we go left with Lust. And then on the third pack, we did have a series of unfortunate events, and Jim Carrey did not star in this dungeon. Fiery Enchant goes off as I press my CDs. I do have Reincarn, but in the moment, the cogs were turning in my brain, steam was coming out my ears, and I thought the cast had stopped. But, in fact, it still had 0.2 seconds left to finish, so as I press Reincarn, I just instantly die again, which is just a shaman special right there. I wouldn't be a shaman if I didn't have these sort of moments. Another enhanced special as well, and I honestly thought I'd waited long enough, but I send off my Primordial Wave bolts on the pack just before Priestess, and then I just get 1-2 striked by the gods I ripped aggro from. So another shameful walk back to the pack and the boss. Made quick work of Priestess, but most of our deaths from this dungeon came from the swords. You have to be super on point with your CC chains with them, so they don't have time to jump. And I always tend to send more Frost Shocks on them as well, just for more instant damage in the hopes of whittling down their numbers. Razan was also swiftly defeated, and we pulled 2 Scry Screamers on top of him as well whilst we were doing it, just for some extra funnel damage and time saving. We do a super insane pull with 3 sword packs, and none of us die, but you'll see how perfect the CC chain had to be and the damage needed to get them down. It is semi-RNG as well with how many of them you get jumping on you at once, on whether or not you're just going to flop over, which is exactly what happens in a future pull where we pull 2 sword packs in it and I get CC'd by entangling and one shot. So as we're finishing the pack before we go upstairs towards Vocal, we end with about 98%-ish mob count. And normally you'd skip this pack if you've got a DH, you just cage left ad, or if you don't, you just invis past it. But I think the tank was on autopilot and he ends up just pulling the pack anyway, even though we only needed 1 more mob. Thankfully though, it wasn't really an issue as we had pretty good time left for the dungeon. It did leave us all a little bit confused though. Then we padded on the totems in phase 1 for overall and we defeated Vocal. Now for the gatekeeper of my Atal'Dazar Ryogain's Yasma. We have Lust, which I send after the first ads die. We do end up losing the Paladin as he wasn't topped up on one of the Soul Rens, but he did have Bubble, and if you watched last episode, you know what I said, but I guess he didn't save it for this dungeon. We have another sketchy moment here where the spiders are sniffing up my butthole about 1 centimeter away. I cannot actually believe I didn't get clipped by them. Something which happens in real life as well also happened in the dungeon. So here's the scenario. Have you ever been walking in town or down a street and the path is quite small and you end up coming in contact with someone who's walking towards you and you both kind of do this little dance, kind of moving in the same direction trying to get past each other? Well, the spider does that exact same thing with me. But thankfully though, after the dance, we do defeat Yasma, Poggers. We gain +8 points. I had no idea how we got top damage, even though we died in our CDs a few times, but a dub is a dub. Now everyone, we have our first 28 key, and it went way better than I expected it to, honestly. But Fall has given us trouble in the past. This week, the Ripper mobs are pretty sketchy because of bolstering. We do end up losing the Paladin from this because once they get a few stacks and they target someone, they are gonzo, deleted from existence. Honestly speaking, Blizzard should just axe bolstering. It's just not a good affix in my opinion. It just actively slows down how quick you can clear the dungeon and you can't chain pull. Next season, I'd love for them to just throw out all affixes out the window and just YOLO it, as it is a fated season so they can experiment, test the waters. I'm not going to show the first boss as it was stomped as always, and if I ever do show the first boss, just know something has gone terribly wrong. With it being fortified, this area is pretty nuts with the damage coming out. We lose the healer and the paladin quite a bit, just to the chrono burst and the tainted sands going out. I somehow didn't die to my own chrono burst, which is what normally happens. We somehow just kept ourselves going, and we even had to CC the Enervate cast, and I thought that was going to seal my fate because I couldn't really heal myself anymore. I was very surprised to live. It is normally me falling over in this area, and we had really good RNG that we weren't targeted too often by the damage going out, the debuffs and whatnot. We end up getting time waste down with only one death on the boss as well. We do have Lust for it on pull, which normally means that we're being a little bit slow on the timer. Sometimes when I come into this dungeon, we can have Lust up just before the double dragon pull, or we have Lust up like 50-60% into the time waste boss. It's not really too much of an issue though, because as you probably well aware, Fall isn't based on the timer, it's just based on whether or not you can actually complete the encounters. After time waste, we end up waiting around, and at the time I couldn't really remember why we were waiting around, but looking back through the footage, I think people went out to change their talents for the rest of the dungeon, which is common to do so just before the last boss, as it is a DPS check for single target. I swear though you only would do that for the last boss and not before Blight, because there's still quite a few packs to clear. I could be wrong though, feel free to enlighten me in the comments because I am unsure on that one. We clear the dragon packs one by one as they are really spicy on fortified, and if you ever do a double pull, you are insane. We have a couple eventful moments on Blight as well. We end up losing the tank in phase 1 to the breath because it does hit them pretty hard. Thankfully our paladin had Shield of the Righteousness up with some quick thinking, and then he CR'd him back. Then your boy does the most stupid thing going. Normally you have Lust and you Lust the phase 2 when the dragon spawns, as it's pretty spicy with the necrotic winds going out and corrosion debuff. So instinctively, I do so. But we still had 26 seconds left unsated, so I end up wasting a Lust use here. And then I end up going down later on the second necrotic winds, which I didn't have anything for, but I take it as my fault anyway, as maybe the healer probably could have kept me up if we did have Lust. We do end up finishing the boss thankfully, as the rest of the people weren't playing like clowns. Unfortunately though, we have a similar story as always, and Iridikron is slowly becoming the biggest gatekeeper alongside Yasma of my Rio gains. We have a really clean boss fight up until the last phase where you burn through his shield before he wipes you. We face him right after we do the soak on Chromie, so it wasn't the best time to get him to 100 energy. We end up losing the priest instantly from the first tick, as he wasn't topped up, and then the paladin ends up going down slightly after him. We see all the paladin and the priest after those two deaths, but ultimately we end up missing out breaking the shield by, I want to say 1% or something as he finishes the cast. Really tragic. I did have a little look on the overall though after we depleted, and we were actually cranking. We did the most damage we've ever done on this key. Now for a pretty tough key on Fortified, we end up sending a 27 Waycrest. We go left with Lust in a pretty big pull. A few of the casts of Spirited Defense go off. I kicked one of mine earlier. I think someone else just forgot to kick theirs. So we all end up doing reduced damage to the pack. I personally don't take Purge anymore, as we have better things in the talent tree to put a point in, and we're also playing with a Priest and Blood Elf, so it's not really necessary. Paladin is popping off on the first pull, and we're just kind of doing enhanced things, trying to keep up. We then move on to Triad, no messing around, as we didn't even pull the side packs with the Froggies, so we have to be really careful not to move too far on the sides, otherwise we'll aggro there. We end up losing the Priest pretty early to the Curse debuff, and then a bolt goes off at him at the same time it explodes, so we see our him. He does have Dispersion up, but he may have possibly been saving it for Jagged Nettles, because that's what I would do for my Astral. Then for the boss itself, it goes horribly wrong for me. I did not really expect to see this happen. So we start bossing down Sister Briar, and I end up just getting meleeed after the boss had already lost 20% HP. And then you'll see the fastest reincarn in the world, and I instantly get meleeed again. You cannot make this shit up, honestly. So then my point of view is just the floor for the rest of the fight. We clear the courtyard with 0 deaths, and we somehow defeat the Soulbound Goliath with also 0 deaths, which is pretty mad and definitely a world first spectacle for myself. I now use Ghost Wolf as well just before he finishes the cast of Soulthorn, so if I end up getting targeted, I end up taking reduced damage. I do wish that they would change that talent though, because the fact that we have to wait 4 seconds to get up to 20% is just mad. We then have another really clean part in this dungeon. We wait outside while the tank gathers the mobs inside, just so we clear everything out before a Raoul. And we only have 1 death from all those packs, which came from aggro, and not even the Gorgeous Bleeds. These Gorges are probably the worst part of the dungeon to deal with, and the maggots, because the bleed darts are ruthless. We have 1 death from the Priest on Raoul, on where the boss casts his frontal called Rotten Expulsion. If this does target you or someone else, just sidestep in the direction the boss isn't facing, because in this instance it was actually cast on the Druid, and it's the Priest who died to it because he wasn't watching where the Druid was and where the boss was facing, so just be wary. But after that we smash Raoul and we head downstairs. We end up doing this really big pull going downstairs in the Triad area of the manor. Normally you would just cut through the kitchen after Raoul. I hadn't actually done this pull before, unsure if it's a standard one. Not sure if you've done it, let me know. I end up just focusing down Alma because she has a lot of HP, so I was just funneling away. We play the area before Lord and Lady Waycrest really slow, as with the amount of casts which go off and the volleys back to back, it just makes sense, especially if the time is okay and there's no need to play risky. We do down Lord and Lady Waycrest, and then we head downstairs. We move on to Gorok Tool, and he was easily defeated too. Pretty pog, time 2 keys this week so far. We got plus 10 points, which is huge, and that takes us to 3-4-3-1. We did lose out to the Paladin and overall, but we were dead on the first boss for quite a long time, and we're also competing with him getting PI, so the odds were stacked against us. Moving on to a 27 Rise, we run with the same healer and tank, just tagged along with them after the Waycrest. We pull the Keeper with 2 packs and then send Lust. This pack feels rough playing Enhance, I don't know why. It just, by the time I normally get my damage out, the shield ends up popping up, so we end up doing reduced damage anyway. And I never really seem to push my normal numbers I do in bigger AoE packs in different dungeons. We do normally ramp up though towards tier, kind of fight back that damage on the overall. We then move on to Maiden, the mini boss, probably the deadliest mob in the area. Our Pug Paladin friend gets absolutely smoked by the orb. It is quite deceptive when it comes back to her. He runs back, and what do you think happens? Yeah, he dies right before he gets back to us again with another orb. Poor dude. We smash through tier, no deaths there. And we were the first to get past the gauntlet. Easy clap. We bloodlust double dragons, and this terrible area I'm personally not a fan of after the dragons, and you'll see why. Because of how our frost shot works and P-wave spreadings and the smallies always kind of trickling in, you end up just like passively cleaving them, and then I always get aggro. And there's an ability called Triple Strike, which happens to me, and it happens a lot of times when I do rise. And in this dungeon, it one-taps me. And it does it to the ret a few times as well. So after we clear this area, we then go to Morchi. I did take Earth Grab Totem at the start. It's really handy for the clones if no one hits them. Did not go as smooth at some points though with that idea. Our clone gets broken free. So I had to do a quick little run around, and I was doing a little maneuver. We got 3 stacks of the debuff because the other clones had run into the rooting pools. So I quickly shifted mine around because I didn't want to get us 4 stacks. But I ended up taking a melee hit. So whether or not that was worth, whether or not we would have been alright with the 4 stacks. I mean, it isn't tyrannical, so we probably could have lived. And then we eventually did get Morchi down after a little bit of running around. We head over the timeways where we send Lust on the Demolisher, and I get absolutely rolled after the tank turns around and slightly get clipped by the Mortar Swirlies when it was targeting the Paladin. I think for the future, I'll probably just end up hugging the backside of the boss. Don't make a joke out of that. And not put myself in a position like that again. Next, we had the 3 horse people, and let me tell you folks, that consecration hits like a truck. It's bad enough on its own, but because it's entangling, of course it's going to wait to entangle you as the consecration is under your feet. So we have a few deaths there to that. On the boss fight, we lose the priest to Bladestorm, and I end up going down to the Serrated Axebleed, which is a heavy damaging dot. I didn't have Astral or Pot available, so couldn't keep myself alive. But after that, we do get the boss down. Now we're only Deos left, and we have around 3 minutes 40 for the fight, which is definitely doable. I see the tank pulling the boss, so I start sending my DPS, and I fall over to a melee. Not died to getting aggro there before. Normally the tank taunts it, and we're good. Guess it's just one of those things. The rest of the fight is just a race against the clock, and I will play you the last 15 seconds to witness what happens. Sag. Very unfortunate stuff. We definitely could have timed it. There was a lot of deaths throughout the dungeon, and I 100% hold my hands up to a few of my own deaths. But we move on to the last key. Now for the finale at 27-4, this series' favourite dungeon. I'd have to bring up the stats with what dungeons have been shown so far, but I can almost guarantee that 4 will be number 1 by a wide margin. We blast the first area fine. We do have a few deaths to the Rippers due to bolstering. First boss goes down, and then we move on to the spicy area. We do have a few deaths from Bloom and Tainted Sands, and we do the Shaman special where we die and then we reincarnate instantly into death again. We rack up a few deaths on Timeways, but we do end up bringing it down. We do a questionable pull here after Timeways with the double dragons without Bloodlust, mind you. So as you can imagine, we do end up wiping and dying a lot. Please have a look on the right hand side of your screen at the deaths as we pulled the dragons. And then take a look at the deaths after we killed the dragons. Big fat Keck W right there. Flight goes down, no issues there. And then it's moving on to Iridikron, our favourite boss of this series. Yay! Now for Iridikron. Nothing happened other than this pixel perfect capped home from your boy. I don't think I'll ever do that again. We end up smoking Iridikron, and honestly it feels so good killing this boss after all the depletes he has given me. This dungeon gave us a nice +9, and that takes us to 3440. All in all, not a bad week really. Hopefully we can get that juicy 3.5k soon. I'm going to start pestering my guildies into trying to trade me the Tainted Heart trinket from Farak, just so I can live better in higher keys. Thanks for watching though, and if you did enjoy the episode, leave a like and subscribe if you do not want to deplete your own keys. And a special thanks to the Patreon homies. Have a great day everyone.